everyone, and welcome to a new video. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about eyeshadow palettes again, and this video is going to focus on cool toned eyeshadow palettes because there just aren't that many cool toned eyeshadow palettes. And when I first started into makeup, I was really into my cool shadows because they aren't as outspoken as a warm toned one. Plus, if you have fair skin and a neutral to cool undertone, then cool tones can actually look a lot better on you. So that's why we are going to be discussing some cool toned eyeshadows today. And today I have 4 palettes for you again, like last time. I will make sure to link the warm tone palette video that I did just recently in the eye above. But the first palette we will be discussing is the Naked 2 by Urban Decay. I'm also going to talk to you about the Too Faced Chocolate Bonbons palette. We have the Lorac Pro 2. And we have Zoeva's En Taupe palette. So those are the 4 palettes that will be featured in this video. So the first palette I'd like to talk to you about is the Urban Decay Naked 2. This is one of the very first cool toned eyeshadow palettes I owned. I think this is one of the very first eyeshadow palettes I owned, period. I was very happy when this was released because I was very much still like in my exploration of what I like and what looks good on me. So this palette was definitely a must-have at the time. And I think that if you really like cool toned shadows, then this is still a good one to go to. In this palette you get, again, just 2 mattes, maybe 3. Blackout is quite matte too, so 3 mattes and everything else has a shimmer or even sometimes a bit more of a chunky glitter like this one here. I think that this palette has quite a bit of variety. I'm especially a fan of the like last 6 shades right here in the middle, but I also really like Chopper. And it also has Half Baked, so if you are looking to also have a gold there, then this is a double one that's also in the Naked 1. For some reason, Urban Decay ended up putting in Foxy, which is like a yellow undertoned highlight, which on me, this is a little bit too dark and it doesn't really do much of a highlight. So for me, the palette really starts here, and I like all of the shades up until the black. I'm not a fan of black shadow in eyeshadow palettes. I never end up using it because it's a little too stark against my very pale skin, I find anyways. So I do feel you have a little bit of variety, but because it does have a lot of shimmers in this part, you do get a lot of lid shades. So if you're really looking for a palette that can do it all, then one of the other options I'm about to show you might be better. Then Too Faced Chocolate Bonbons. I think this is one of the more recent cool tone palettes that was released. There aren't just that many cool tone palettes out there because I think that most people like the warm tones. But I really enjoy this too. What you do get with Too Faced palettes, just like in the previous videos, that you get a couple of like pops of color. In here you have this like gray, blue tone gray, you get this really bright pink, and you also get a purple right there at the top. The layout of this and also the packaging I'm not a fan of. I don't like the hearts. I think the case looks incredibly kitsch and it just looks like children's makeup. And I'm not a huge fan of that cocoa smell that they are bang on like putting into almost all of their products. So that's something that if you don't like smells and if you don't like the packaging, then this is definitely one that I wasn't thinking of getting at first because I just thought it looked so tacky, but the shades in here are incredibly lovely. This palette doesn't have a single shade that I don't like or that I don't think I can use, even though this pink looks very much out there when I reviewed this and did some looks. I think if you put this all over the lid, of course, you get a very pink eye, which isn't that pretty. But if you put this in the crease with one of the darker browns in there, it's actually really pretty. So while this may look at first like it's not going to work, I found this actually to be very surprisingly workable. In the look that I'm wearing today, I'm wearing Mocha in the crease, and I'm wearing this one, which is Divinity in my brow bone. I think of all of the palettes I'm about to show you, this is one of the best brow bone highlights in any of these cool tone palettes. It has a little bit more versatility than the Naked 2, and you do get a little bit more of a matte versus shimmer finish, but I do think that those crazy pops of color and also the packaging are one of the reasons why this palette isn't everybody's favorite. Lorac Pro 2 then. Lorac Pro 2 is another one of those cool tone palettes that doesn't just have neutrals, it has a couple of colorful shades in here as well. As with any Lorac palette, the top row is matte and the bottom row is shimmer. Really great if you like to have as many mattes as shimmers in your palettes. But since this has a couple of colors in it, again, I find that this is a palette that not a lot of people talk about. You get a plum, a navy, and then this jade shade is really, really pretty too. Today I'm wearing a little bit of the plum shade on my lower lash line, and I blended it out with another shade. And I used Nectar to blend out my crease. Nectar is probably one of my favorite shades in this palette because it's so versatile. You can blend things out with this. You can use it as a transition shade. I used a little bit of chrome as well on like this inner third of my lower lash line. I also really like these shimmers right here at the bottom. I'm not really a big fan of this silver because it's a bit too... It's not a pretty silver, let's put it that way. So this is a very workable palette, but I can see because it doesn't have just neutrals, which the Urban Decay Naked 2, for instance, does have, that this is again a palette that not a lot of people reach for necessarily because for some reason brands seem to think that they need to put colors in a cool tone palette. I'm still looking for a palette that is all cool tone neutrals like the Naked 2 but with more mattes. That's something that's not there yet. There are a couple of good shades in here, but I'm not using every single shade in this palette by any means. Last but not least, the Zoeva En Taupe palette. This palette has a very purpley gray taupey undertone, and it has a couple of very interesting shades, especially these two at the bottom. These are almost duochrome, and I've used this one, Spun Pearl. That's the highlight in my inner corner, and I'm not sure if you can see it on camera how it translates, but in real life this has like a blue flash to it. So it's very cool tone, very icy. And this is a very pretty palette, but it doesn't have a lot of depth to it. So again, it does have a couple of mattes. It's got 4 mattes and everything else is shimmer. This is the darkest shade that you get, so deepening up the crease is something that's a little bit more difficult with this. So a lot of looks tend to look a little muddy with this, but the quality of these shades is excellent. I also used a little bit of this one. This is Outline, and I used that to blend out the plum shade from the Lorac Pro too. So this has a couple of really nice shades. It's just not as versatile because it's a very like bland color scheme. So this would have been helped with just like a cool tone dark brown. You know, that could have worked in this to really give it a little bit more oomph, but that's not in there. As with the more warm tone video that I did, I'd like to answer a couple of questions like, hey, if I like this, should I buy this one? Or if I like this, then what should I do? And I think that, of course, again, if you like more mattes than shimmers, then of course the Lorac Pro 2, that's going to be your jam because that just has so many more mattes than any of the palettes that I'm talking to you about. Even if you only use those first 4, that can be a look. You know, these 4 matte shades can be a look on its own, which can be very pretty. And you do get a lot of variety in this as well. So I think that if you're looking for a very versatile palette, then this is a really nice one. I think that if you're looking for something that's very everyday, and very easy to work with, then I think the Zoeva palette is probably the best one. Even though it's quite bland and it can look muddy, this does have a lot of good shades that you can just like slap onto your face and be out the door. Especially these 2 right here, as well as this one right there. I mean, it has a couple of really, really good shades that can just do a one shadow look very, very easily. You've got a couple of mattes to then blend things out and really pull things together. So if you're working in an office or for school and you can't really wear very heavy eye makeup, then I think that this one is a great one to wear. If you're looking for a palette that has just cool tone neutrals, then I think the Urban Decay Naked 2 is your best bet. Even though it doesn't have that many mattes in here, it only has the 3. And 2 of the shades are actually quite warm that I don't reach for personally, as I already mentioned. You do get a black, so if you do want to go for a little bit more depth and definition, then again you do have that option there, which the Zoeva En Taupe, for instance, doesn't have at all. But you do have all of these gorgeous shimmers. You get some silvery grays that, unlike the silver in the Lorac Pro 2, aren't too stark and almost white base. These also work really well together with the other shades that are in the palette. So I think that if you're looking for a very cohesive cool tone palette that is just neutrals, that the Urban Decay Naked 2 is your best bet. Now, I already mentioned the Lorac Pro 2 as being very versatile and like gives you a lot of variety, but I think that if it comes to true versatility and a palette that can take you from day to night and like do it all, then again the Too Faced Chocolate Bonbons, like in my very first warm tone video, I think that this one gives you that because it does have, for instance, this really nice dark truffle shade, which I think is a very interesting deep brown, but that has a cooler undertone. And since this doesn't have a black, to me this is one of the most perfect palettes ever, because this shade or that shade will just see me through darkening and deepening up a shade just fine. But you also have all of your neutrals that you could wish for an everyday look. You get some colors to play around with. You get some really pretty highlight shades for either your brow bone or for the inner corner. You've got a good transition shade. You just have everything you need in one palette if you like cool tones and you really want to have a lot of variety and versatility with a palette, then I think, again, that Too Faced is your jam. Some of my favorite shades from the Urban Decay Naked 2 are Chopper right here. That does have a lot of fallout, but with a bit of Fix Plus, but also with your finger. This is a very pretty shade. YDK is a very nice, like, cool toned rose shade. It has more of like a pinky, taupey undertone. It's a very pretty all over the lid shade. I also really like Suspect. It's one of the best taupes ever. And I really like Tease. It's the only crease shade that's in here, but I do find that it works with all of the shades here. And I really enjoy Snakebite as well, because that's a shade that you can just like put on the lower lash line, use as a liner in the outer V. So those are my favorite shades from this palette. Then from the Too Faced Chocolate Bonbons, I also have a couple of favorites. Almond Truffle is one of my favorites because it pretty much can do everything. Molasses Chip is very, very pretty on the lid. As is Cafe au Lait, which also has a little bit more shimmer and glitter to it. Earl Grey is a very pretty shade if you want to like create some more of a smoky eye. And I already mentioned Sprinkles as being one of my favorite inner corner highlights in this palette. From the Lorac Pro 2, I really enjoy these four shades at the bottom that are shimmery. That's Rosé, Mocha, and Chrome, I believe. Yeah, Chrome. And I also really like the Jade shade and the Navy shade. In the Zoeva palette, I really enjoy these two shades because they have that duochrome shades. I don't see a lot of brands do anything like that, so that's something that's very special about this palette that I really enjoy. And I also really like these two shimmers here because they're very nice all over the lid. So in terms of price, I think that the Urban Decay Naked 2 is again the most expensive palette that is here. I think this still retails around like 55 euros because that's what all the Naked palettes now seem to go for. So this is definitely the most expensive one. The Too Faced ones I think are around like a $49, 45 euro mark. So these are a little bit more affordable and you do get a lot of options with this. The Lorac Pro 2 palette is 45 euros, but if you are in Europe, then this is of course a notoriously hard brand to get. This is a fairly affordable palette, but I think with all of the duties and shipping, that is going to come down to around the same price point as an Urban Decay palette. The Zoeva one is the most affordable palette of the four. These retail for about $22.50 and they ship internationally from their website. So we've come to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. These were the palettes that I wanted to talk to you about when it comes to cool toned eyeshadow palettes. And I'd very much appreciate it if you could leave a comment down below with what sort of palettes you would like me to compare next. Because I really enjoy doing these videos and I've been getting lots of great feedback on the first one that I did. So I really hope you enjoyed it. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. And please subscribe because I make new videos every single Sunday. I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!